Welcome back, everyone. Oh, that's loud. Oh, dear. Thank you very much for being so punctual. I'm delighted to be joined by Stephen McKeown today. So, Stephen, I first heard about your story and what you were doing with AI whenever it was a Software NI AGM. You were opening the session describing your story. So I thought this is a story that other people need to hear. So I'm delighted you've come along today. So, if we start out at a very high level, so what do you think about the future of work? What excites you most about AI's potential to reshape business?
Hey, so thanks for having me. Morning, folks. I don't know the link to the Software AI AGM, so I'm trying to remember back to see what I actually bloody said in the thing. When you're talking about, there's probably two things really come to mind. One, I heard a lot this morning. So a lot of far thinking in different domains. There's education, there's public sector, private sector, all brilliant. There's sort of two. There's kind of, when I was thinking about what I was hearing, there was kind of two things falling out. One was there's still a lot of effort on efficiency, productivity type things, proof of concept type things, and I think that's good. It's right. Maybe it's the right place to start. For me, the really exciting piece is that transformative piece. And it's really, I was trying to think of an example of where I've seen this before. So I think most of us are old enough to have seen the internet age come in, like dial-up modem type time. And I was thinking about what Amazon did in terms of how the internet completely reimagined and transformed a business model. In fact, it was a brand new business model, one that didn't exist before, versus say how some of your, pick your favorite bookstore or retail store like Barnes and Nobles, who tried to bolt it on the side. I think you can think of numerous examples in different industries of where that happened. But the successful companies clearly were the ones who very fundamentally reimagined what the world looks like. I think, if anything, we are in, as great, if not much greater, transformation and stage of reimagining business models with AI than we ever were with the internet, and that was pretty big at the time.
Yeah, and I think that's that bit, as you say, that almost the efficiency piece it's almost table stakes. Everyone's going to do it. It's the how do you reimagine how you create value in the world in a different way, and that's the bit I think is so hard for people to get their head around, because AI is one of those technologies that everything we've had to date has almost been additional. So public cloud allows to do more. AI is one of those things that is both additional and reductionary in the same time, because it can and will take work away. So in terms of kind of your own leadership journey, how do you find and help your leaders to create that new reimagined world? How do you create that sort of confidence for them, or sort of the guidance of the leadership?
So all states come through a pretty radical transformation. So I think it's fair to say the software industry that I see internally, externally, doesn't look anything like it did even 4-5 years ago. Like, it's fundamentally changed, and I'll guarantee you in another 4 or 5 years it'll have changed even more again. So it's really hard to predict where that goes into the future. We, as a company, made a decision to fundamentally rewire the way our business worked. And I think AI tends to sometimes start as a technology initiative leaning in, and it's like, are we doing something in AI? I used to lead the AI Center of Excellence for Allstate globally. We made all of the mistakes. We focused on POCs. We had a list at the end of the year of projects and initiatives that we said delivered huge amounts of value. Sort of looking back on it, and we changed the way we were doing that 2.5 years ago now. But when I looked at that and seen the successes there, they were what I describe as maybe bolt-ons to the business, or a replacement of a piece of the business. None of those really, I believe, in retrospect, got into the fabric of the business. Did we realize that at the time? No, we thought we were doing great. We're doing AI stuff, we're bringing it in, we're doing all of the, most of it was generative AI at that time, agentic in terms of like call flows, voice, that type of thing, not, the agentic that exists today's orders of magnitude more powerful. All of that happening. So we made a decision as a business to fundamentally rewire how we work. We stripped out all of the management layers that you would have found in pretty much any large historic enterprise. Pick your domain, pick your space. And we moved to a product model, product mindset. So everyone in those roles, we reshaped that into engineers reporting into engineering, doing engineering. Product managers who are focused on product management, business architects fundamentally rethinking business process, and we put all of those people back to back. But it was around, the most fun, that was kind of the structural piece, but the thought, the culture shift behind that was what I'd term moving from project-based delivery to outcome-based thinking. And I actually heard Rachel touched on it. One of the AICC guys actually talked about it on the stage earlier. If you don't know what you're trying to achieve, and I think sometimes we use processes we run today, there's people there and they're making decisions based on their best judgment. Maybe the way that they always did it, maybe historical precedent. But we probably are guilty, and we have been guilty of how often do we fundamentally rethink what is the outcome, not the output that we want to deliver, and then how do we measure that? So whenever you come to looking at things like AI, it becomes a tool in your toolbox. And if the dev team, it's a piece of software, it's a web UI, if they can use Boolean logic, A plus B equals C to solve it, use that. If you need Gen AI, if you need agentic, whatever those tools are, now you can start reaching in and using those and integrating them. But that starts to change the fabric a bit. That means the business and the technology supporting that are very much going back to back on this, and you have the rethinking on both sides at the same time. It also, frankly, means that you can scale it. So we're one of the largest insurance companies in the world. We're a Fortune 100 company, one of the 100 largest companies in the US. We have us doing things at the POC or the initiative level doesn't really move the needle for us as a company. So we need to find things. That's allowed us over the last 2.5 years to build a work environment where we've moved from kind of a maintainer ethos with innovation, but it's innovation, incremental innovation within the sphere, to what's fairly radical innovation. And maybe it might be a career highlight for me, but Gartner at their North American keynote last year referenced Allstate as how a large, let's say, traditional enterprise should use and adopt AI. And the reason they said that was nothing to do with the tools or the technology we were using, but it's the fact that we had reshaped and rewired our business to allow us to start solving business outcomes, which meant every team was able to pick up the AI and use it as a tool. It was a tool in their toolbox, rather than kind of the tail wagging the dog, which was some of what I was guilty of when I was leading the COE.
Yeah, but I think the bit, and for kind of inspiration for anyone in the audience, is that it was set from the top. It was we're going to embrace this. It's going to be tricky. We're going to learn lessons. We're going to fail. We're going to do, but we're going to get better. And I think that's the bit that, for me, is that bit around what are the sort of cultural challenges that you then had to face whenever that vision was set and going, okay, we're going to reimagine how we create value in the outcomes. So tell us a little bit about those stories.
It was set from the top, but it was driven from the bottom up. And I think that was fairly radical in terms of how we did it. We assembled product teams with very, very clear mission and vision, measurements of what they're driving, and understanding of how those collectively roll up into enterprise outcomes. So as a leadership team, particularly in the business side, their job was to find business outcomes. And then rather than, the traditional on-time, on-budget delivery, which is how, IT, I think, typically worked, did we deliver the thing? Did we spend more money than we planned to spend? And was it delivered on time? Within that, and that's kind of typical project management, within that there's no concept of, did this thing actually do the thing we thought it would when we sat down to plan it, 18 months before, 36 months before, maybe even longer in some cases. So it's very much a movement from that to, okay, now we've got the business outcomes defined very clearly from the business. How do we self-organize and start to mobilize against those business outcomes? And when everyone's measured against the same business outcomes, a lot of those barriers that you would have seen in a traditional IT org, architecture applying architectural standards, security applying security standards, project management looking at on time, on budget, test looking at test quality, test outputs. All of those things where you're in a silo and their remit, I think it's fair to say, was how, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. But the collective ownership of, no, we need to deliver this. So it turns from hey, are you doing it? And I'm going to mark your homework, into how do we make this possible? And then you're assembling the right people around the table. I will say this. So we created a set of standards around how product teams operate. We're implementing and enforcing those standards, and we call it like certification against those standards. All of this, I'm sure, is sounding incredibly bureaucratic to this audience. until I say that the people who own those standards are our engineers and our product managers. The people who are assessing the adherence to those standards are engineers and our product managers within the teams. Leadership is not setting. We don't even get consulted sometimes when those standards are changing. We're just like, hey, this needs to change for this reason and this reason, because you've got practitioners in those roles who are pulling that together and looking at it. They're evolving and growing that. So as they see a new domain, or we're expanding that. So it's a really exciting thing. I also think as an engineer, it's the environment that I would want to work in. Because now why did I become an engineer? I like solving problems. Do I like pressing keys on a keyboard? That's not the reason I started this in the first place. It was just a necessary evil of having to write assembly way back in the day. So I sort of go like, how do you get there?
That's very cool. I think the bit you say, empowering your people to feel like it has not been done to them. They were actually creating the change themselves. The North Star might have been set, but they were actually mapping out what to do. And you're almost saying, you know what, some of these things we'll find out about, but we're empowering our people. Maybe looking a little bit further ahead, obviously you've been through, kind of, you say, some of this earlier stuff with this generative AI, and you're bolting things on. You've continued to iterate and enhance what you've done. What do you think the future workforce looks like whenever we start to look at kind of humans and that increasing agentic AI? How do you see the workforce shaping up?
So I think we can already start to see elements of that. So clearly the future's mixed. A lot of the transactional things you expect to see agentic come in and start to do more of. I think there's clearly concern around it. My position's probably a lot more positive than that on it. And if I look at engineers, as I said, I became an engineer, or a recovering engineer. Someone told me I was now, because I don't actually get to write much code, or any code. It was around the problem solving. And I think even when you look at the universities and coming through, we spent an awful lot of time teaching people how to use tools. It's like, here's a hammer, here's how to use it. Here's a saw, here's how to use it. That's kind of like, that was a necessary evil. But when I think about my degree, we probably spent 90+% of the time learning tools. We did some compiler stuff and some stuff around, but again, it's tools, it's wherewithal. We probably spent a scarily little amount of time thinking about problem solving using engineering and using technology. There's a little bit. I think there's some project management. Now, I didn't graduate yesterday, so I know it's moved and there's a lot more focus on it. So for me, the exciting thing's probably two. One, kind of within a smaller context. I'm seeing engineers, product managers, business architects, UX designers, you name it, spending way more time innovating, focused on how do you define a business outcome? How do you measure that business outcome? The other thing, by the way, see, when you start using AI, it becomes incredibly easy to measure the effectiveness of the AI when you know what it is you want it to do and you know how to measure it. Like, you deploy a new version of the model. Pretty obvious. Is it doing more of the thing or less of the thing? If you can't do that, it becomes a big grey ball of string, and then you start stringing lots of these things together, and you're trying to figure out, hey, did this work or not? That's an incredibly hard thing, but that's sort of an aside. So I'm certainly seeing, product teams focus much more on the innovation. I'm seeing teams spending more time sitting around a table. Sometimes it's a virtual table. A lot of the time it's a virtual table. Going, we need to, this is the problem that we're trying to solve. Here's the business problem. Let's define it, run a discovery and framing on it. Let's experiment. Let's get something out in 2 weeks. Did it work? Yes, let's scale it. Was there AI in it? Don't really care. But if there needs to be, you know what? There will be. The other piece is probably from the region. I'm really excited because if I look at the trajectory of the history of IT, and I don't want to make this a history level, but you guys all seen it. We started digitizing sort of back-end processes like accountancy and all the rest. We grew it, then we went into the internet world. We built stuff, and then it was around maintaining that. So an awful lot of the IT industry was around maintaining, which was where you needed large volumes of people who knew how to keep the lights on or run the business and then incrementally improve. All of that stuff has pivoted, and when I look at this as a region in terms of the product that we deliver, it is very bright people, creative, people who want to problem solve, people who are very good at collaboration. Allstate, we made an unprecedented investment in digital skills. We announced a couple of weeks ago it's 16 million into digital skills. It is to make sure that our folks have access to all of the tools in the toolbox to do that problem solving. But as a region, this comes into a quality metric, and the ways of working, the ways of operating, and focusing on delivering outcomes, not outputs. I think that's a huge opportunity for here, because frankly, when it was, if I reverse back 5 or 10 years ago, when it was you seen lots of companies maybe outsourcing large parts of their IT, they weren't doing that to innovate and drive change. They were doing that as a cost management, and they needed to do it at scale. So I actually think that as a region, we can lean into it, and I think there's lots of work. Software and I see one of the sponsors here helping as an industry. Kainos, big part of what we're doing as well, pulling all of that together.
Fabulous. So I think one of the things that's come abundantly clear is that you've moved from that sort of mindset of efficiency to reinvention. So for those in the audience here that are on the efficiency journey, and that's an important step, how do you shift that mindset towards reinvention? How did you motivate that workforce to go? You give them all the tools, all the training, go reinvent.
It's funny that you phrase. So we started with the outcome-based delivery or outcome-based thinking, and we really forced that into ourselves. And then we started asking the questions: what else needs to be true? So it really wasn't. I suppose the joy of it. It really wasn't leadership pushing this stuff down. Our journey was we identified a hotspot where we had sort of teams that were already leaning into this in part of our business, where people were already starting to do that. We started crystallizing that. We started codifying it, or having the people in those teams codify, how does this work? Why does it work? They were automatically starting to pull that in. That caught fire. And then suddenly you got everyone else's attention. So you're not trying to push people into something. You're going, I want into that. How do I get into that? And then we were starting to spread that. The initial group that we had for that was quite small. As time grew, and really the way that we worked, it was as we were going through and we'd developed those standards, we were pulling more in. So as they were looking at other digital product teams, now we had restructured into that model, but we weren't necessarily all fully operating in it. But you were able to detect where are the peers that I go, this person gets it, they're part of it. They were pulled in and made that circle bigger, and over time that circle's just come. So you end up then at some point with a critical mass and a tipping point that the fabric of the way that you think about and solve problems becomes so strong that it would be incredibly hard to operate in any other way. And maybe a moment that strikes me, we had an external company came in to talk about AI, and they came in and there was a group of leaders, and they started talking about start with a little proof of concept, figure out who your vendor is, pick one of the agentic tools or the generative tools, pick it, start with a small thing, start going. And you could see the intake of breath within that whole engineering group. They were like, wait a minute. And then the questions started coming, it went into a discussion, and I was going, okay, our guys are fundamentally thinking about this differently. You can't, at that stage, you can't not do it.
Fabulous. And so we're getting close to time. So one of the things that I always like to ask is, if you wanted somebody to remember one thing from your story today that they would take back with them to their organization, what's that one thing?
I'm gonna say that the thing for me that's most critical is that movement from project-based delivery to outcome-based thinking. Because I personally think the AI becomes incredibly easy when you know what it is you want to solve, and you're rethinking what this business looks like. You're starting from there, because then you get your business partners on board, the technologists come on board, and engineering teams, they know the problem they want to solve. You're a million miles away from the old worlds of specs and business requirement documents and all of these types of things that I see some people nodding, that you'd have had in that world. When you have that, you've set the right culture, the rest of the stuff starts to feed into it and becomes very obvious then why you're doing it and how to do it.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And Jenny, thank you for being so open today. Not to put you in the spot, we'll see if we can get you back here next year again. You can tell what is the last 12 months done, but please do put your hands together for Stephen.
Thank you for having me.